Previous administration and previous Congresses created an expensive new drug program, passed massive tax cuts for the wealthy, and funded 2 wars without paying for any of it. If we had taken office during ordinary times, we would have started bringing down these deficits immediately. These are far from the best of times. By any measure, my administration inherited a fiscal disaster.
Blame Bush, it's still going on. Now, the Bush blame game became so pathetic. I like to try and explain it, well, this way. If President Obama gets stung by a bee, if the dog bites, if the bee stings, if he's feeling sad, he blames George W. Bush. He has a hangover for drinking too much, he blames George W. Bush and Jack Daniels. Now, the president is very thin-skinned, and he's even continually been lashing out at me. Should I take this personally? Watch this.
In 2012, Latinos voted in record numbers. The next day, even Sean Hannity changed his mind and decided immigration reform was a good idea. Rudy Giuliani said, Putin is what you call a leader. Mike Huckabee and Sean Hannity keep talking about his bare chest, which is kind of weird. With respect to Sean Hannity, I didn't know that he had invited me for a beer. His opinion of me does not seem to be very high, but I'm always good for a beer. I'll put Mr. Burgess up against Sean Hannity. They'll tear him up.
Tear me up. Is that a threat of violence? How should I take that? Now, President Obama will officially be out of power in 4 days. 4 days, this long nightmare ends, and he's leaving behind a huge mess that President-elect Donald Trump is going to be forced to clean up. But it appears that Donald Trump will be taking a much different approach than Barack Obama. Instead of doing nothing and blaming his predecessor for everything, President-elect Trump looks like he's actually going to try and fix the country's problems, the problems we all face. Here with reaction, author of the best-selling book, Treason, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. You know, when he gave his farewell address the other night, I went on air, I gave his economic record. If I talk about foreign policy, I can talk about Egypt, Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, North Africa, China, Putin, Russia, reset. I can't think of a single area of the world that's gotten better. And on the economy, I can't think of, or do I know of any measure I can cite that shows things have gotten better? Why does he have this compulsion to blame?
Well, I think that probably in his childhood, his favorite movie was Fantasia, and his whole life is a fantasy. You know, I mean, he lives in that. For him to behave the way he does, he has to be a combination of bitterly hostile to traditional America and living in a fantasy world. And every time you turn around recently, he's been doing something destructive on the way out. I'm just glad it's only 4 more days. Because literally, I've just got a report about some things they're going to try to do that would change the rules for how we deal with electromagnetic pulses in a way which actually makes it harder to defend America. When you look at this stuff, you think, where are these guys? Why is their bias so much against traditional values and so much against defending America? And yet that's a fact. And so from his standpoint, maybe it's been a great 8 years because, you know, he got to be president, he got to go on vacation, he had a big house. But maybe people were suffering and maybe we were losing in the Middle East, but it didn't bother him very much. I mean, you know, if you have John Kerry reporting to you, you have no idea. I mean, think about it. He has no idea what's going on in the real world because Kerry is supposed to be explaining it to him.
Yeah,
Kerry doesn't know anything about any of
He doesn't know what's going on in the world. Yeah, it's pretty dangerous. Thank God only 4 more days to go. You know, I've studied this man now for more than 8 years. For a solid 9 years, we have vetted him and vetted him. It is pretty amazing that there was never a sister soldier moment. There was never the era of big government is over, the end of welfare as we know it. There was never one moment that I can think about where he broke with his radical ideology, indoctrination. Can you think of any? And what does that say if somebody's that rigid?
No. He has consistently been everything he learned at Columbia Undergraduate School from left-wing anti-American professors. He has lived out that kind of a life in a way that you were the only person, and I confess at times I thought you went too far, and I was clearly wrong. You were the only person in the summer of 2008 who broke the code, who knew what he was doing. But let me just for 1 second take you on a detour.
Okay.
Imagine our mood right there. Imagine our mood
Yeah.
and the mood of all of our listeners if Hillary Clinton was being sworn in Friday?
I think our
Now,
viewership
I don't
would be
have
cut
any
in half.
gaffe bigger.
Listen, in 2012 when
Look.
Romney lost, everyone was so depressed they just went away. They just left me for like 6 months on my own. I'm doing the show talking to myself every night. But there is a psychology here. Let's look at, for example, he sucks up to the Castro brothers. He gives the Iranians, the #1 state sponsor of terror, the $1.5 billion, pays a ransom, allows them to continue to spin their centrifuges, and then he betrays Israel with this latest UN resolution, ends wet foot, dry foot for Cuban refugees. It's like he's on the wrong side of everything. What does that tell you?
Yeah. Well, look, here's a test question for everybody who studies this. If Barack Obama had set out to deliberately undermine and weaken America, what has he missed? I mean, what else would he have done? It is unimaginable how much damage he has done, and you're exactly right. The whole effort with the Iranians, who, by the way, now that we have paid basically ransom for one set of hostages, they've actually locked up more Americans.
Yeah.
You know, we're not getting any positive response. The whole deal with Israel, which is horrible, and which potentially, unless it's reversed by Trump, will set a stage for a disaster in the Middle East. You know, all these things, it's as though Barack and his team, or President Obama and his team, set out to do everything they could to undermine America's position in the world as their going away president.
Well, let me ask this question, because I think you're raising some really good points here. And here's a reality that I want you to tell me if you agree with. Because he didn't respect the Constitution, separation of powers, co-equal branches of the government, ruled by executive fiat, Donald Trump is going to spend the first few hours of his presidency, or at least that first week, eliminating, I would argue, 75% of Obama's agenda. Then you repeal Obamacare and you replace Obamacare. That's another 10%. And the only thing we're stuck with is him doubling the debt or accumulating more debt than every other president before him combined, and the horrible judicial appointments. Tell me if I'm wrong. It's going to be like, and I think he's going to have a very hard time dealing with this, it'll be like he was never there. Fair?
Look, there was a very funny interview where somebody talked about, asked him, and he said his advice to President-elect Trump was to do more things through legislation because it's harder to turn around. And I think it's kind of like he finally figured out the joke, which is all this easy stuff he did with executive orders is easily turned around with executive orders. And you're right. I describe him as the incredible shrinking man. It's like watching air come out of a balloon. Between now and Easter, his legacy will shrink until it's about the size of a golf ball.
You agree with me? He's not going to handle this very well. Because I really believe in his heart, the reason he never broke from his leftist indoctrination, this is Frank Marshall Davis, a Linsky disciple, Acorn, the Reverend Wright of the Church of GD America, Ayers and Dorn, he's never shown any capacity to grow. Don't most presidents, you're the historian, grow in that office? Don't they mature? Don't they reevaluate how they think and come to conclusions?
Well, but to grow, you have to learn new things, and I think he has basically a closed-loop system. He arrived with a set of very radical left-wing beliefs. He interpreted all the information he got through those left-wing beliefs. He surrounded himself with people who had only left-wing beliefs, and so by the time he left, there was no reason for him to have grown. I mean, I think his national security team probably thinks they've been very, very clever. They've weakened America in Cuba, they've weakened America in Venezuela, they've weakened America in the entire Middle East, they've weakened America in dealing with Russia. They actually probably think this is a success because their left-wing view is that a strong America is dangerous to the world. But a weak America, by definition, isn't dangerous.
I bet, like when Reagan came into office, the world will see America very differently very quickly. I hope I'm right. We'll have more with Newt Gingrich right after this break, and also coming up tonight.
I think that they, including the president, should step up and get his people in line and tell them to grow up and accept the fact that they lost the election.
Go Reince Priebus. He's calling on the president to finally tell Democrats, accept the election results, and also tonight.
promised a better deal economically for blacks. Are you going to give him a chance?
No, absolutely not.
Why not? Wouldn't you want a better economic deal if he keeps his word?
He will not keep his word because he's schizophrenic.
Our own David Webb traveling to the nation's capital this past weekend to speak with people attending the Reverend Al Sharpton's march in D.C. He's here later tonight along with Roy Murdoch. That and so much more, Michelle Malkin included on this busy news night.